welcome everyone. Today we have a special guest joining us at our quality events. I'm thrilled to introduce Emilia Korczynska, the head of marketing at UserPilot. And if you're following Emilia on LinkedIn, you know that she brings a wealth of experience in the world of marketing generally. And we're super excited to have this conversation today. Emilia, thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me, Olga. I'm good. I'm very excited to talk about it. I think it's an interesting topic.
Fantastic. So we have folks here craving for some programmatic SEO knowledge, obviously. And I bet that you guys have quite a few questions. And by the way, if you could raise your hand or maybe share in the Zoom chat, if you guys have tried programmatic SEO already, so we kind of like understand what's the general knowledge here. And guys, as you listen to Emilia speaking today, get your questions ready for our Q&A session at the end. I think we should have plenty of time for that. Before we get into it, as a short intro, could you maybe share a bit about your background and journey, that led you to your current position as the head of marketing?
Yeah, so it wasn't actually a very straightforward journey. Initially, at the start of my career, I wanted to be a journalist. But then when I started working as a journalist, I realized I don't like working as a journalist. I took a few different routes and detours, and somehow I ended up running a translation agency. And quite a few years, like it was working for 10 years. I wasn't working on it full time for 10 years, but quite a chunk of time. And from there, at some point around 2015, 2016, I started getting a lot of requests for actually content translations, right? So that was sort of the beginning where content marketing was, taking the word by storm, and essentially people wanted to translate their content into English or other languages. I kind of got interested in content marketing at that point, and one thing led to another. I was working with SaaS companies that were looking for internationalizing their blogs, and I realized that's a lot more interesting than translations themselves, and I saw a lot more opportunity in that. So I started, working with a few brands, and then I decided I don't want to be, just a service provider. I want to actually kind of join a startup. So I joined one SaaS startup in Poland. I tried building my own in China. That didn't work out. So yeah, I joined that one in Poland, and after a couple of years, I actually joined UserPilot, which I felt was sort of more focused and going in that direction where I wanted to go. And I've been with the not so small startup anymore ever since. So I've seen it all, joined like when there were 5 people on board, and everything was still very early and very scrappy. Now we're around 100, and much more sophisticated, hopefully, in our processes. So that's long story short.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. And I know that programmatic SEO has been one of the areas of your expertise, and it brought UserPilot significant results. And maybe you could share with us what brought you to trying programmatic SEO to begin with.
Yeah, so very simply, we went to Brighton SEO in 2022. That was like April 2022, and there happened to be a whole panel of talks on programmatic SEO. And I was just sitting there for an hour, completely mesmerized by what I was hearing. Then we chatted with one of the speakers after the event, Mark Williams-Cook. He's also, a quite well-known SEO on LinkedIn, runs his own agency. And I felt like this was a great opportunity. But all of these talks were from larger companies like Trainline, for instance, that had a lot of engineering resources to implement these, post templates and create thousands of programmatic pages. In our case, still a small team, no engineering resources, that felt a bit out of reach. And it wasn't until a few months down the road that I was actually on holiday, caught food poisoning, so I had to like cut my holiday short. But you know, what are you doing when you're on holiday and you're like sick? You start reading about programmatic SEO, right? That's what you do. So I just started Googling it at that time, and it was only 2 years ago, right? Yeah, less than 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. There was hardly anything about programmatic SEO at that time, especially without programming. But in general, it was so new that there was very little information. But I stumbled upon this blog by Sammy SEO, Sam Partridge. And he was actually experimenting with programmatic SEO just using Google Sheets. He's doing it in a completely different context, like affiliate sites. And I remember he was talking about this case study where he was building a site for pet owners and just answering the question, can dogs eat chocolate? Can cats eat bananas? Can hamsters eat strawberries, right? So he had these two variables, animal and food, and he was trying to produce tons and tons of pages, you know, catering to all these variables or these combinations of animals and foods, right? To properly cover all the possible options for pet owners. And of course, you know, promote the affiliate products that he was selling or someone else was selling. And you know, I kind of gotten deeper into it, the spreadsheets that he was using, and I realized that you could replicate the strategy for SaaS for like the very bottom of the funnel keywords that are, you know, driving a lot of conversions. Because even at that time, our niche was getting saturated. We were like competing against probably between 10 and 20 tools, right? For all the different use cases. So, you know, UserPilot is a pretty extensive platform for product teams. So it combines analytics, it combines engagement, it combines surveys. So we had a lot of different use cases. You could use UserPilot for improving onboarding, but also collecting feedback, also like understanding user behavior. So that all kind of clicked that instead of can hamsters eat strawberries, you can have UserPilot versus AppQues for user onboarding, UserPilot versus Pendo for in-app surveys, UserPilot versus Chameleon for product analytics, etc., etc. So you could use tools as one type of variable, and then you could use use cases as another type of variable. And with just these two types of variables, just like he did with animals and food, you could already build out a lot of different post templates that cater to these different keyword patterns. So that's kind of how it started. I built 1 or 2 templates, you know, initially myself, like MVPs of what would have then become our programmatic SEO strategy. And they worked. They were kind of so-so because I still made some mistakes, of course. But they worked, and then we decided to meet up with the rest of our content team. We just spent a week trying to figure out how to make these templates work better. And we just took it from there. And, you know, since then, that was like October 2022. We've published almost 600 posts using the strategy with like several templates that we developed since.
Yeah, 600 articles you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite impressive. But like before programmatic SEO, how much would your team spend writing this, you know, bottom of the funnel alternative versus and other kinds of articles, would you say?
Yeah, so that would probably take around 10-15 hours, right?
Yeah, for a single post, right?
Yeah, for a single post. So we obviously have a process, right, where the editors write the briefs and then the writers write the posts.
So basically that's saving like 9K hours in one sitting, sort of.
Yeah, when you kind of
If you
calculate
multiply.
it, yeah, if you multiply it, that's it, yeah.
So yeah, which makes it even more interesting. And I know that programmatic essay requires a lot of prep work and a lot of spreadsheets, just like you mentioned. So did you develop all of that yourself and like with your marketing team, or did you get any help at all from any of your developers
Nope,
or
there's
tech people?
no tech people involved. And our team was able to like learn how to use them quite well. So,
Hmm.
I have stopped actively working on building new templates for the team around like beginning of 2023. And since then they've been just like iterating and actually improving on the templates. So one of
Hmm.
our editors has background in technical SEO, so she has a little bit of programming knowledge and is definitely quite good at Excel. So she came up
Hmm.
with some ideas how we can use different formulas, and it was just like a very iterative process of
Hmm.
building and improving the spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Um, I think, I would like now probably redo a lot of what we've done. So
Uh-huh.
there is definitely a lot of tech debt, even though we haven't used any, like programming at all for the spreadsheets. Like the
Hmm.
older spreadsheets use some formulas and use some solutions that we wouldn't do anymore, right? And we might still be using them because we just kind of couldn't be bothered
Hmm.
to redo them, but we know of more effective ways to
Definitely.
do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can you maybe tell us more about the process, like sort of like the step by step that you followed for user pilot, so our listeners here understand better what exactly do you have to do in order
Oh,
to, yeah.
yeah. Do you mind if I share my screen? I think it
Yeah,
might
of
be a bit
course. I
easier to, I
think,
actually, oh,
can
computer,
you,
it's
I think you should
disabled.
have access. Is it?
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, let's. I'll
Okay.
just transfer the host rights to you, so I think you should be able
Right.
to.
Yeah. I can share now. Great. Cool. So actually, I will be talking about it on the next Write and SEO. So I have a little deck prepared for this already. It makes life easier.
Uh-huh. So a sneak peek,
Yeah, a
your
sneak
deck.
peek, exactly. But the first step is, of course, to decide on what kind of keyword patterns you're going to be covering in your posts, and these need to be very repetitive. So you need to be able to produce a lot of posts from each template, because if the template only allows you to produce 5 posts, then the upside of using programmatic SEO for this and
Hmm.
building these templates is going to be very low, right? So you want to look for keyword combinations that ideally include 2 or more variables, right? Because that means from every database entry, you will be able to create like hundreds of posts. Um, so say in our case, we looked at, because we are a SaaS, B2B SaaS company, so we looked at keyword patterns like competitor 1 versus competitor 2, right? Competitor alternatives, right? Then your tool versus competitor, that's kind of similar to the first one. Then competitor feature, best tools for use case 1, use case 2, use case 3, etc. Best tools for persona, these are examples. And then you can kind of combine these and do things like competitor versus competitor for use case, right? Which is something we do a lot as well. So for instance, AppQues versus Pendo for user onboarding, AppQues versus Pendo for product analytics, etc., etc. So once you have these keyword patterns, you know which kind of templates you can start like building. I would recommend, building 1 or 2 templates first, because then you have the hardest part, which is filling in your database. And how you build these templates is essentially you're doing keyword research the same way as you would do for any other post. So you're kind of, well, first you're looking to combine all these keywords, right, that you have in the keyword combination. Now it's very easy to do that with ChatGPT. When we started, and believe it or not, ChatGPT hasn't even like rolled out to the public yet. So we had to develop ways in the spreadsheets themselves to combine all the keywords. So let's say you have the pattern tool 1 versus tool 2 for use case, right? So you need all the combinations of all the 2 unique combinations of tools with all the use cases. Right, so kind of multiplied by the use cases, you can probably already see how mathematically how many combinations there can be from just say 15 database entries. So now you can just like ask ChatGPT to do this for you. You say you have all these competitors, you paste a list of your 20 competitors and I don't know, 10 use cases, and you say, like, give me all the combinations without repetition of these 2 competitors and these use cases. Yeah, and it just gives you the list. Now you can copy this list, paste it into a spreadsheet, and then split it into columns. So you have 3 columns next to each other, right? Which essentially cover all the combinations you can produce with one template. Why is it important to split them into 3 columns? Because you will be adding each column into a separate variable column in the template. Yeah. Then step 2, creating your own databases. So you essentially want to cover all the different features, all the different kind of aspects against which you're going to be comparing your tools, for instance, right, against each other. Okay, so for all the competitors that you're writing about, what are you going to be writing about? So you're going to be writing like probably a general description of the tool. What is, AppQs, what is UserPilot, what is Pendo? Then you're going to be probably covering the screenshot of the dashboard. You're probably going to be covering the pricing. And then you're going to be covering certain features. So you essentially list all the features of these tools that you're going to be comparing to each other in the columns. And you're also listing other things, like maybe you want to paste a review there, right? Like maybe you want to split it between positive and negative reviews, right? Maybe you want to like have a short list of pros and cons of this tool in bullet points, right? So you kind of list in the columns all the different criteria of comparison for the tools, right? Similarly for the use cases, right? All the different criteria related to the use case. So maybe like certain jobs to be done, right? In the use case, things like that.
That's unique content, if I may ask. That's the unique content pieces that you have to add to pretty much every single tool that you'll be covering, correct?
Yeah. So this is done manually in our case. I've tried doing this with ChatGPT, but as you well know, AI tools aren't great with writing about tools because they've never seen the tools, they don't have their experience, and they write like very generic stuff. So it isn't helpful for our users. So we're filling in this manually. We're essentially outsourcing this to our writers. So instead of having the writers write the post and sort of reinventing the wheel every time, and sometimes writing 4 times about the same tool, and we are paying for that, for them to like write 4 times about the same tool, we have them write about one tool only once, right? And they don't put it in the database, they just write it in a template that says tool name, right? And it's just a regular brief template. It can be Notion, it can be in Google Doc if you prefer, and it's just listing all the comparison criteria, right? So write the general description of the tool, write the description of this feature, that feature, write about the tool's pricing, write about the pros and cons, and paste 2 reviews, 1 positive, 1 negative, screenshot of the dashboard, screenshot of the pricing, screenshot of feature 1, feature 2, feature 3. And that's something the writers do. And then our editors basically transfer that into WordPress, go into the text editor, and the text editor is of course in HTML, and then they paste each paragraph from the text editor in HTML into the respective columns, right, of the database, because the database is in HTML, so all the posts need to be uploaded to WordPress, in our case via a WordPress plugin in HTML.
What kind of plugin are you using for that?
So we used to use import, it was simply called WP import export plugin. Now we switched, and it escapes me, but it's called almost the same. There are like dozens of these plugins.
Yeah.
Because this is not for programmatic SEO. These are just plugins for uploading CSV files.
Sure.
Right. So anything for uploading CSV files will work for this. And as you know, with WordPress plugin, the quality of the plugins is sometimes better, sometimes worse. So we found that after a while, the first plugin was like crashing our website. So
yeah, that could be often the case.
Found another one which is called almost the same. So now I don't want to, like, off the top of my head say which one, but it doesn't really matter which one, right? It just has to be a CSV upload plugin. Yeah, so this is the database, and for the template, going the wrong direction, you're kind of doing research for the keyword combination that you picked. So say competitor versus competitor for use case, and you do research in SERPs or in Surf SEO or whatever other content intelligence tool you're using, the same way as if you were writing this post from scratch. So you're looking at what kind of headings you need to have in your outline, what kind of content and what kind of order, right, needs to go in there, what people are essentially looking for. And then you're deciding on the post outline. You're actually writing the, if it's easier for you that way, you can pretty much write the post, but then instead of saying, user pilot versus Pendo, which is more cost effective, right? Or which is better for user onboarding, you replace the actual names of the tools and the actual use cases or features with variables, right?
Yeah.
So you literally write in curly brackets, or again, whatever you want, but you need to somehow indicate that this is the variable. And you write tool 1 versus tool 2, which is better for use case 1, right? And curly brackets. And you basically write an outline out like that. You write the filler text, right? That again is going to be filled with variables. So you may write the introduction, you may write the conclusion, you may write some filler text between the paragraphs, right? And then you transfer this whole outline essentially into another spreadsheet. So this is kind of how an intro to such post template would look like. Looking for an effective use case tool and wondering if tool is the best option for your SaaS company with numerous tool alternatives, blah, 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 right? And this is then how it looks in the template, right? You have first certain columns that are fixed. They don't have any formulas. You fill them in manually. These are the columns for your variables. So for selecting like what you're going to be generating. So this is where you fill in your tools from, again, these columns that I asked you to split based on your list of keywords, and other things that, can be done with formulas, actually, like tags, categories, slag, author of the post. So these are all the meta columns that you need. And then you actually have the content columns, right, where these formulas and the template text go. Okay, so the template text lives inside a substitution formula, right? That then swaps the variables, in our case here, tool and use case, for content that is inside a particular cell of the column, typically here, because it's the same, you know, tool and the same use case. It's just a range, so column E and column G, right? But
so one of the formulas is that we're using is substitute. Any other formulas that someone needs to know, to get the results here in that kind of spreadsheet? I've seen concatenate as one of them.
Yes, concatenate is for like linking all these cells together to produce the actual post. But how are you fetching the data from the database, right? This is where import range and VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP or index match formulas come into play. So to give you an idea, this is still substitution formulas, VLOOKUP formulas.
Yeah, VLOOKUP.
So this is basically vertical lookup, and it essentially fills in the content columns by fetching whole database entries and placing them as the entire paragraph in the template, right? So essentially what this formula does, it looks for the content of cell E2 in your spreadsheet, which is one of the meta columns with your variable, for instance, the tool, in the database, which we import from another spreadsheet. The link to the spreadsheet is here. It's just literally the link to the spreadsheet in inverted commas, right? And we have to define which tab in the spreadsheet, right? Because you can have multiple sheets in one spreadsheet. So you need to define the name of the sheet. In our case here, that's the new tools database. And then you need to define the range. So in our case, it's from A2 to Q100. So the whole spreadsheet, basically. And this is fetching the content, it's fetching it vertically, right? So it's going down essentially the first, it's looking up basically the content of E2 in the first column of the spreadsheet that we have defined here in the link, so in the database, okay? And it's fetching it from column 6, okay? So it's actually, it's going, across the columns from A2 to Q100. It's stopping at column 6, right? And then it's looking for the raw, right, that contains the same text as cell E2 in the template, right? So let's say we want to fetch the general description of app queues, right? And we know, let's go maybe to the database. So we are in the new tools database, and we know app queues is here. And the general description is in column F. Column F is column number 6, right? So the VLOOKUP goes across the spreadsheet. It stops at column 6 because we told it to, right? And then it fetches the content of E2 in this particular template. So E2 was actually help hero in this case. So this formula would then, after landing at column 6, go down until it finds help hero. All right. So it would go down until row 27 and essentially fetch information about help hero from here, again in HTML, and paste it into the template in the place where you had that. So this is exactly the formula that I put on the presentation, right?
It looks like a lot of lots of spreadsheets, right? And I was just wondering how much time it's taken you to set up all of this together.
So just to create the template now, because we already have done it so many times, it would probably take around 2 hours. But of course, initially it took us much longer. The biggest challenge is with filling in the database, because you need to essentially outsource it to the writers, right? The same way as you would outsource writing a blog post. The advantage is that you can then write multiple variations of the blog posts. So instead of just writing Pendo alternatives as you would traditionally and ask the writer to write about Pendo alternatives, you can now have Pendo versus AppQues, Pendo versus User Pilot, Pendo versus Herp Hero, best Pendo alternatives for user onboarding, best Pendo alternatives for user engagement, best Pendo alternatives for checklists, right? Pendo versus AppQues, which is better for analytics, right? So it's a lot more scalable, and that's where the return on investment comes in.
Emilia, we have a question from the chat, if you may. Doesn't this create an enormous amount of content that looks almost identical, by Kevin? Could you maybe comment on that? I guess that's the question of, the content being unique and repetitive. Like, what is the percentage of unique content that you would get at the end of the day?
Yeah, so each keyword combination has a different intent, right? Because you are comparing, right, for instance, help hero, where are we here? Help hero against user pilot for new customer onboarding, but then you're comparing help hero against user pilot for onboarding automation. And then maybe you're comparing user lane against user pilot for self-service support. So people searching for these queries, right, have like a very different intent. They want to compare these two tools for a different use case or for different like job to be done. So, the amount of overlap from the spreadsheet itself is quite small, because you only pretty much have these template text to introduce it, right? And maybe for the conclusion, what comes inside is, like pretty unique for each tool. And of course, certain elements repeat, like what is the tool, or, the tool's pricing. This will repeat. Shall I accept this or deny this? One of the participants wants to record this locally. I think you will get the recording, so there is no need for that.
Yeah, there's no need. We'll send it.
Yeah. All right. So essentially, you can, you have some chunks of text that repeat between the different posts, but they would repeat to some extent anyway, right? I mean, maybe your writers are going to use slightly different language every time, but your pricing doesn't change depending on which tool you're comparing yourself to, right? Or I don't know, your dashboard image doesn't change because you're talking about, your general dashboard image. It doesn't change because you're talking about two different use cases. So maybe let's.
I think someone's jumping in with some noise. Alexa? Okay, thank you. We have another question from Kevin here. So Kevin is asking if we could share the URL of a blog post or two that were created through this process. Do you think maybe after the call, after this event, or unless you have something prepared right now?
Yeah, I do. Category.
Maybe you could share some right now. That would be great.
Sure. So most of the posts in this category were created with Programmatic SEO, and you can see there is a repetitive pattern to them, right? For user engagement analysis, Loo Assist for product adoption, Loo Assist for event tracking, features, pricing, and review, features, pricing, and review, features, pricing, and review. But guess what? Pretty much nobody sees this page, right? Because that's not how writing for search works. Like, we are writing, catering to different intent of the users. We're not writing, people don't go on a specific tools page, go into categories on their blog, find the tools category, and then like find the, you know, right tool for them. So they see, they're using programmatic SEO.
No, yeah, that's definitely makes sense. What about the links? You know, as you're scrolling down, I wonder like how long those articles are. Like, are they pretty much the same length, you know, because of the template, or they're different? How do you determine the lengths to begin with? That's a lot of screenshots.
Length of the post, because it's like an in-depth comparison, right, for specific use cases. So the length of the post will depend on the length of your entries in the database and how many entries you're using in a specific template. So this template, Loo Assist for user behavior analysis, focuses on features, pricing, and review for one tool only, right? And of course, this is not in the title, but we're also comparing it against our tool, right? And you can see the outline in the table of contents. So it's what is Loo Assist. So this is essentially the general tool description from the database. Must-have features of user behavior analysis tools. Must-have features, this is descriptions of the features required for this use case from the use case database. Loo Assist features for user behavior analysis. This is description from tools database of Loo Assist, but for this specific use case. So depending on how many words are actually in the database for these specific entries, the length of the post will be different. You can control that by like essentially telling your writers that, hey, for this, when you're giving them the briefs, right, with the outlines of what you need in the database entry, like you can specify how many words you need in each section, right? So in each column. And that way, when you are building the template, you can already predict based on these database entries how many, you know, words you're going to have, right? Because you know the general description is 200 words long, and then I have this tools comparison for 3 different features, and in each feature I'm also writing only 200 words, so that's already 800 words, right? And then I'm also adding my tool and comparing it for these 3 features, so that's another 800 words. And then the template text itself is, say, 500 words, right? So based on that, I know that my post will be around 2,100 words.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. And I think it's time for us to get to the most important and exciting point. So what have been the results that you've actually received, you know, after all of this?
Yeah, so this is not really a strategy for driving tons of traffic, because most of these combinations are like, this is like a zero search volume strategy pretty much. So it doesn't drive a ton of traffic, right? A lot of
Like conversions.
Yeah, but it does drive conversions for us, you know, like 1.1% conversion rate from these blogs. This is significantly higher than like all the blogs in total in general, right? Because they are very bottom of the funnel blogs. Say 10 conversions altogether, like the value of this, and these are only 2023 results when we only just started, because as I said, we started working on the templates in October. We started really publishing the content at the end of 2022. So in 2023, we published around 370 something blogs from programmatic, right? So getting 10 conversions to demo, for us, this is worth around $7,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
considering one post costs us $15 to produce, right? Considering the costs of filling in the databases by writers that are paid as if they were writing one blog post, like you can see that there is a positive return on investment just from direct last touch attribution, because everyone here in content knows that this is not how we're attributing a content ROI, because otherwise, like, we would always assume that, oh, content doesn't work, right? But then you have like tons of assisted conversions that we're not able to track because we have like 3,000 blog posts on our page. So if we were to track all the assisted conversions, we'd go crazy.
Of course.
But yeah, last touch conversions, we're happy with that. This is not, again, a life hack, silver bullet, like, pull the trigger and you will, win. But it is something we're satisfied with and we're continuing investing in.
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely looks like a solid working strategy that we could, definitely recommend to SaaS businesses. And speaking of non-SaaS businesses, I also have a question from Shatman. He's asking, okay, hold on. Is this programmatic manner applicable for every form of topic, any industry? I ask because at the end of the day, driving traffic and trying to rank is the main goal. And hence my second question, how does this work when it comes to extremely high difficulty keywords with keyword difficulty over 80? And in programmatic SEO tactic you use, what was the result when it came to Google ranking? Okay, I think you've shared a little bit of the results. But yeah, what about the other industries? You've started mentioning, with this, pet store, right? The content that was created also through programmatic. But what would you say how it works for other industries other than SaaS?
It works for any industry. It's just a matter of finding a keyword pattern in your industry that allows you to create many combinations basically of the variables, right? So because it doesn't work really if you have unique, keywords, right?
Non-repetitive, like there is no pattern to those.
There is no pattern, or the pattern has only one variable. So for instance, what is use case? Yeah. You can still do it, but then it means that you fill in the use case database with all the use cases, and you're getting only one post per row, which is sort of a low return for me.
Yeah.
Like I'm looking at being able to produce 10 plus posts from every single database entry. Right?
Yeah, makes sense. What about high difficulty keywords? Would you go after that kind of keyword with programmatic SEO?
But again, it
doesn't
has
matter.
to fall into the pattern. And, it's rare that these high volume keywords will be falling into that pattern, right? Maybe in some industries, best tools for something or tool alternative for particular use case will have a higher search volume or higher keyword difficulty. Typically, these are more like, they're also called like zero search volume because some of them don't have search volume at all.
Exactly.
Right, but ultimately you don't rank only for this one keyword, you rank for like hundreds of related keywords. And this is where you're getting this lift because, publishing these posts for $15 per post or even less, right? Depending on, again, how many templates you have, how many combinations you have. Like this is sort of on a par with, server AI, right? Or lower than server AI.
We have a question from Paul. Hi, Paul. Do you combine programmatic with not programmatic work too, or have you switched to all programmatic? I believe I know the answer, but I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, no. Of course, we haven't switched to exclusively programmatic because, as I said, programmatic can cater to only a specific type of content, right? So these very repetitive keyword patterns. And we still have a lot of unique keywords that we want to cover, but it just doesn't make sense to, you know, do them programmatically because they wouldn't fit into any template, right? Or they would fit only to this like one variable, one off template. So it wouldn't make sense. Like if you had a lot of time to actually categorize all the possible keywords in the world, right? Maybe you would see that more of them are actually falling into some patterns, and you could execute more of them with programmatic. But typically, you limit yourself to these like bottom of the funnel keywords.
Yeah, agreed
right?
here.
Or glossary. Yeah.
Yeah, could be the case. One other question from Shadman. It's not really a question, but he mentions that he's concerned about keyword cannibalization.
Yeah, everyone's
What would you
concerned.
say? Everyone's here.
So I think there is a misconception about what keyword cannibalization is, right? That like why would there be, to kind of bounce it back, why would there be keyword cannibalization? Because each of these combinations, you know, caters to a different search intent, right? If someone's looking for Pendo checklists, right, or Accuse checklists, or best tools for checklists, they have 3 different intents. The fact that you're mentioning Pendo checklists in all of these articles does not mean that these posts compete in SERPs for the same search intent. Okay. Well, they could rank if there was no content that answers the search intent more accurately. It does then happen that you have a post, best tools for onboarding checklists, and it also ranks for Pendo for onboarding checklists because you mentioned Pendo in that post, right? But if someone then comes in and writes Pendo checklist, so a more, you know, bottom of the funnel keyword, right? Then they're going to one-up you because they answered the search intent more straightforwardly. And Google is looking at the time to result, right? So it wants to present the results that answer the search intent most accurately, right? Rather than fish for one paragraph, that kind of does it, but not in depth, because actually the whole article talks about something else. It does happen for searches where, you know, the content hasn't answered the search intent directly. Then you do see that Google directs you to a specific paragraph in the content that doesn't actually cover this question end to end, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, thank you so much. And let me check. We have one more question actually by Paul. Do you foresee any possibility where Google penalizes too much content? Like so much content, it must be programmatically developed as opposed to written by a human, which, yeah, also brings me to a question. When you schedule that content, do you schedule like a batch of articles, or is there a specific timeline for them to be published, like every day, or a couple of articles per day, or just a batch of them at once? How do you schedule them?
You could publish them all at once, and you could schedule them. We schedule them simply because we have a process for publishing, right? And we need to create, for instance, the featured images, right? We haven't been able to find a plugin. We experimented with a lot of plugins, but so far we didn't find a plugin that creates decent featured images. So they still need to be
no automation here just yet.
Yeah, which seems quite ironic, right? With so many AI generation tools, but especially with text, and we want like the images to be named correctly, etc., and conform with our standards. It just looks horrible. So we publish them in smaller batches, like 5, 10 per day, let's say. But even if you could sidestep this limitation and just dump them all, here for SaaS we're talking about batches of 100 blog posts, 200 blog posts. That's nothing for Google. That's nothing for big publishers. And if this was the case, that websites would be published just on the ground that something is published programmatically, then weather forecast pages, timetable pages, like, I don't know, flight booking pages, travel websites wouldn't exist. Like, a lot of content that you have online is already so widely used. That's why I'm saying I didn't invent the strategy. I just went to a conference where much larger companies were just presenting their results. And the case study, that I found interesting then was, for instance, the train line case study. It's essentially a train ticket reseller and aggregator, schedule aggregator. That's very popular in the UK. A lot of people from the UK, so probably you've used them. And they produced millions of posts on how to get from London to Paris, how to get from London to Birmingham, how to get from London to Newcastle. And just imagine all the possible keyword combinations here. That's a brilliant example. Did they get penalized? No, because they produced helpful content that addresses unique search intent. Like, if you're going from London to Paris or London from Newcastle, like, this is different intent, right? You can't go to London and Newcastle at the same time. Right, physical impossibility, right? So this shows like how powerful and how robust the strategy is. And again, like, people hear AI or people hear programmatic SEO and they immediately think like, oh, Google's going to penalize this. No, Google doesn't penalize scalable publishing strategies or large volumes of content, provided the content, is helpful and addresses unique search intent. That's it. And in some industries, as we just, explained, there is unlimited number of combinations, because imagine all the train connections in Europe, right? Or just between the different cities in London. And people want to know, like, which stations in London, there are several stations in London. Which station should I go to when I'm going to Paris as opposed to going to Newcastle? What are the timetables? How many times per day are the trains leaving, so I can plan, right? Like, how long is the journey? How much are the tickets? Yeah, these are all unique intents and they will be still helpful. And if someone goes first to Paris and then 2 weeks later they're going to Newcastle, do you think they're going to be upset to see that the outline of the post was the same? That you first mentioned travel time, then you mentioned ticket price, then you mentioned how many times per day are the trains leaving, and then you mentioned which station should you go to. No, you won't be upset because this is still helpful. And conversely, you may even like the fact that you have this predictable pattern that you can always check when you're going to a specific place from London and you know what to expect, right? So you can...
Yeah, 100%.
So I guess that kind of answers it, that we shouldn't be afraid of using scalable tactics because they can actually produce higher quality results, more predictability for the users, better UX, right? Because the content isn't all over the place. And once you have produced excellent, high quality entry in your database, you know that it's going to be excellent and high quality every time you use it across these posts. But with individual writers, it's hit and miss. They have better days. You have a content agency, so you know.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the drill. No, excellent answer, Emilia. And I think we're about to wrap up, guys. So, like, if you have any last minute questions, please hurry up. If nobody has any questions. Just to wrap up today's event, I guess I want to say thank you, Emilia, for sharing your valuable insights and experience. And thank you guys for coming over today and choosing to spend this hour with us. And in case you're not connected with Emilia or me on LinkedIn, we will be sending you a follow-up email with a recording of this conversation and also the links to our LinkedIn profiles. Feel free to connect. One more thing, our next event is going to be with Anna Stichenko, the SEO expert from PandaDoc. And she has tackled the pillar cluster strategy and received 300% increase in traffic. So also quite impressive experience. You don't want to miss that. So please stay tuned and hopefully see you soon. Thanks again,
Amazing.
Emilia, so much. It was amazing talk today, and chat to you soon, guys.
Thank you. Just
Have a
wanted to
great day.
mention if someone's looking for more information on this, I have this Patreon account, Content Ops for SaaS, and there is a collection of currently 30 posts on programmatic SEO with some of these templates as well. So if you guys are interested, have a look. And there are also other like folders here. So yeah, it was my pleasure and looking forward to the next one. Thank you so much for having me, Olga.
Thank you.